Hello, everyone, and happy Women's History Month. My name is Tamar Smithers, Executive Director of the Virginia African American Cultural Center, that is going to be located in Virginia Beach, serving all of Hampton Roads, as well as the entire Commonwealth of Virginia. Our mission is to collect, preserve, interpret, inform, and celebrate Virginia's African American history, culture, and community, and to educate the public about African American contributions in all areas of endeavor. We are so thrilled and so excited that you have joined us for another installation of our virtual artist masterpiece series, Voices of Black Women from the Past. Of course, we wouldn't be able to do any of the programming that we have all year round if it weren't for the generous support of our sponsors. So at this time, I'd like to thank the Virginia Beach Cultural Affairs Arts and Humanities Commission, as well as Dominion Energy. Can we give them a virtual round of applause? Awesome. Well, once again, welcome. Thank you all for joining us this evening. We have an amazing program coming up, and I am going to go ahead and introduce our guest of the hour. Valerie Yemimah Davis is a gifted and award-winning Djelimusa, African storyteller, playwright, and producer who uses her talents to teach African and African American history and to promote awareness of lesser known historical events and people. As a self-taught historian, Valerie draws upon the wisdom and spirit of her ancestors to bring their stories to life. Her signature performance is the Martha Ann Field story, a performance that has been received well by over thousands of students and adults in the Virginia area. She has written and starred in several one-woman shows focusing on domestic violence and historical women of courage, giving a voice to not only Martha Ann Field, but the Coretta Scott King, Nancy Green, the first Aunt Jemima, Nanny, the wife of Gabriel, who led the slave rebellion in Richmond in 1800, and Harriet Tubman. Valerie is a recent recipient of the Royal Wolf Film Award for her productions staged and presented at theaters sold out crowds, and her work as a narrator on Until Caleb. As a playwright, she has been blessed to have several of her productions staged and presented at theaters to sold out crowds. Recently, she has taken storytelling in a different direction by authoring her first book, Spirit of the Hummingbird, Mom, Me, and PSP. All of her work is dedicated to her ancestors whose shoulders she stands upon. Valerie, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I'm so excited to speak to you.
Thank you for having me. Absolutely all that. I'm sorry.
Awesome. I know it's going to be a great conversation. I'm looking forward to delving more into your journey in your career, and speaking to Mrs. Martha Ann Fields a little bit later. So at this time, what I'd like to do is show the audience a snippet of a performance that you did with the Hampton History Museum of your performance portraying Martha Ann Fields. So we'll look at that video and then we'll dive right into our conversation.
Perfect.
Trouble in my way, I have to cry sometimes. Lord, trouble in my way, I have to cry sometimes. I lay awake at night, but that's all right. I know my God said he would fix it after a while. And fixed it, he did. But it took him a while. My name is Martha Ann Fields. I was born in the year 1813 on a plantation right outside of Hanover County, Virginia. I wasn't born a slave, but I was born into a system called chattel slavery. I don't remember anything about my mama or my daddy. Either they died before I had any memory of them, or they were sold away before I had any memory of them. But at the age of 6, I started working on the plantation. Now, my first job wasn't too hard. Miss Mary, the woman who owned the plantation, she loved to sew. And I would spend days in her sewing room picking up quilting needles off of the floor for her whenever she dropped them. Wasn't too bad at all. She would spend days telling me stories about her childhood. And let me tell you, her childhood was nothing like mine. And she was carefree as a child. And as a child, I was enslaved. When I turned about 9 or 10 years old, well, Miss Mary, she sent me out to the fields to work. My first job was simply to tote water back and forth to the field hands. And as I got a little older, I was required to work in the fields. And anybody that live in Virginia know that Virginia is tobacco country. And so my first job was working in the tobacco fields. I used to have to look for tobacco worms. Now, if you've never worked in tobacco before, you may not know what they look like. So let me tell you what they look like. Tobacco worms are about 6 inches long and they are about 1 inch round. They're green and they're slimy and they're nasty. And my job was to walk up and down the tobacco rows and look for those worms and remove them so they wouldn't eat the tobacco plants. Ever so often, the overseer, he was the one that looked after the field work and the plantation work. He would come behind you to make sure that you got all of your rows clean. And God help you if he found a worm on a row that you said you had cleaned. You were going to have that worm for lunch that day. And so I made sure that all of my rows were always clean. I stayed out in those tobacco fields for a long time, but I didn't mind it. The work was hard, but I liked being out there with the other people. Oh, they would tell stories about somebody running away or stories about somebody doing this and somebody doing that. And so I didn't mind being out in the fields, and they would always sing work songs. And I love those work songs they used to sing. They may sing something like, "Run, Joe, run, like a turkey through the corn. Run, Joe, run, master's coming on. Oh, run, Joe, run, like a turkey through the corn." And that would help us to keep the time as we would go up and down the tobacco rows.
Awesome, awesome. So as you all can see, such a phenomenal performance, even just from that little snippet, that performance at the Hampton History Museum not too long ago. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that with us, and thank you for sharing that with our audience.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and dive right into our conversation.
All right.
Tell us a little bit more about yourself, your journey. What inspired you to become an artist and a storyteller?
I have actually been an artist probably my entire life. As a kid, I sang in the church choir at the age of 6. I was the youngest member of the church choir. I sang in the choir at school. I was on the drill team. I was on the flag team. And then when I left school, I started doing like theater. I've been doing theater for like 30 years. I did background work for movies that they would film in Richmond, Virginia. And then I started writing my own plays and staging them. So I've actually been an artist basically my entire life.
Awesome. Yeah. Awesome. All right. So let's dive a little bit deeper into your background with storytelling. And I share the same sentiments with you. I grew up in theater. I grew up in cheerleading. So having those early experiences, I think, help to set you up for your career journey, right? In the path that you'll follow. But let's dive deeper into your background with storytelling. This art form and way of communication originated thousands of years ago with visual stories such as cave drawings, and then shifted to oral traditions in which stories were passed down from generation to generation by word of mouth. And in fact, in the West African tradition, those storytellers are known as griots.
Correct.
Can you share with us what element of storytelling most resonates with you, and why did you decide to become a storyteller specifically?
Actually, I didn't really decide to be a storyteller. It was kind of something that I kind of fell into. I was doing theater and all of those things, and I had didn't have a job, and they were doing an at the Hanover Tavern, they were doing these field trips for fourth graders, and they would come out each year and they would meet 7 characters from the past, from the Revolutionary War and the Civil War. Mm-hmm. And a friend of mine was supposed to do the gig and she couldn't do it. So she asked me, she said, Valerie, you want to do it? And I was like, sure, I'll do it. And so I went out there and I had like 7 minutes that I was telling a story of an unnamed woman, just someone that they had randomly picked from the tavern. And I had 7 minutes to talk about how she was the cook and this, that, and the other. And I did that for a year. It was for the month of March, but I did it for a year. The next year, I went back out and someone gave me a book. And the book was about Martha Ann Fields. And I read the book, I know, 3 times straight through because the story was just so incredible. And once I read the book about her, and I extracted information from the book and wrote my own story based on her life. And I started to tell it to the kids. And it felt so much more natural of telling the words that I had written about her life. And from there on, I've been doing that since 2011. I've been out at the Hanover Tavern every March with the kids, the fourth graders, telling the Martha Ann Fields story. And once I started telling her story, I just started looking and studying and researching and reading about other ancestors that we'd never heard of. And I wanted to bring their stories to the forefront. So that's how I got started doing this type of work as a historical storyteller.
Amazing. I think it's so interesting that oftentimes we don't even know that we are interested in something or passionate about something, and it just takes that one experience. And at this point where you were asked to do something and step in for someone else, but being able to have that experience really has just added to your growth as an artist. So absolutely. I think that's absolutely amazing. So let's talk about, this element of telling stories. As a self-taught historian, utilizing your talents to teach African and African American history, why is it important to bring awareness to stories and events that may not be as widely known?
Because African and African Americans have made so many contributions to this country and to the world. And we kind of have, I know when I was in school, you had the big 3. They talked about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., they talked about Rosa Parks, and they talked about Nat Turner. And that was basically all we heard about. But it was so much more that we had done, so many things that we had contributed to. And I wanted to find those stories and let little Black and brown kids know, you come from greatness. You come from intelligent people. And I know we always want to say, oh, we came from kings and queens. And yes, some of us did. But it's the others, those inventors, those healers, those architects, those people that did just everyday work was so great that I just wanted people to know about it. And so I was like, I got to bring these stories that people don't know about to the forefront.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think there's something, we all know the well-known names, right? The well-known change agents.
Right.
But I think in order for us to continue to grow and evolve, having those stories told to us or being made aware of people who made amazing contributions or who have changed the path for us is important as well, especially for our younger people. I think that's so important because, as we know, stories live on in how you speak to each other, how you tell the story, right? And making sure that you take it from generation to generation. So if we're not speaking about people who are not as widely known, then sometimes those stories and those people could be forgotten. So we have to make sure that we continue to bring those to awareness and bring those stories to the forefront. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah. So I know that, everyone's career journey has its highs and its lows, right? And so I'm sure that you have had some challenges, some successes, hopefully more successes than challenges, but although we do learn from those challenges, right?
Absolutely.
Yes, right. So what has been some of your biggest challenges and your biggest successes over the course of your career journey?
I think the biggest challenge is when you do this type of work, and some people call it gig work, but when you do this type of work, it's either feast or famine. And so you have to learn, and I'm still learning, you have to learn that when it is feast time, don't eat everything on your plate. Save some, because famine is coming.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
for African Americans in this country, February is a feast.
Yeah. Yes.
You know that, January might be famine, February and March may be feast, and then you come rolling into April and May, especially if you work in the school system. When school lets out in May, you might have some famine coming up.
Right.
So my successes have been, I try to pull different ways of how I tell my stories. I work a lot in the school systems, but I try to work with other places so that in the summertime, I'll have work. It may not be as much work as when the school is open, but I'll have work. And again, I have some food left over from the feast to feed me while I'm in the famine.
Yes.
So, and I appreciate this opportunity to speak with you. This is amazing. It really is.
Thank you. Absolutely. We're honored and blessed that you've chosen to speak with us today and share your story and connect with our audience. I think it's really, really important. And I love your comment about feast or famine. As as artists, sometimes it's hard to balance that too, because there's one element where you have to take everything that comes your way, right? You have to take everything, but you also want to make sure that you pace yourself so that way you can sustain the famine or the feast, right? So I think those elements are important as well.
Absolutely.
So the last question in this segment is, you're in your storytelling and performances, you have portrayed many iconic and historic Black women who have made a significant impact on African American history and culture, including Coretta Scott King. What inspired you to portray Martha Ann Fields in particular, and why is her story so important?
Again, the book that I read, the book is called The Indomitable George Washington Fields, and it's written by Kevin Claremont. And George Washington Fields was one of Martha Ann Fields. It was her youngest son. And he was the first African-American to graduate from Cornell University. That's a big deal. That's a big deal. And so Kevin Claremont is a law professor at Cornell. And he was doing some research on the first African-American to graduate. And at that time, when he was doing his research, they had someone else listed. And he knew that information was incorrect. And he also knew, he came down to Hampton History Museum, and he got access to their archives. He found a diary written by George Washington Fields. In the diary, it talks about plantation life. It talks about all the things he went through as an enslaved child. It talked about the escape that his family made from Hanover to Hampton, Virginia, all of those things. And he put it in a book that chronicles the life of George Washington Fields and includes his mother, of course, Martha Ann Fields. So when I read that and realizing that I was telling the story in the same space that she was enslaved. So that to me, it was just amazing to be in the same space that she was in bondage and be able to tell her story to people. I always feel her presence whenever I'm in that space and I'm telling her story. I always feel her presence. And then the fact that she escaped with 8 people, 6 of her children and 2 other people, just amazing. And people had to know. Yeah. They had to know the story. And then the fact that her children became such success stories. So whenever I tell her story, depending on the audience that I have, I will draw different things from her story. If it's children, I will really concentrate on the educational part, the fact that her children were not educated on the plantation, but went to college and became successful people. You know, if it's women mostly in the audience, I'll harp or I will concentrate on her being a Black woman enslaved and what that was, being a mother, being a wife.
Yeah.
You know, so depending on my audience, and her story is so big, I can pick so many things from her life and engage the audience with it.
Yeah, I got goosebumps, honestly, when you were telling that, because I can feel the passion you have for portraying this iconic woman, right? And I think there's something about being an actress, being able to be in the moment, to be able to take all of that in and to be able to connect with your audience, right? So as you're seeing your audience, you're able to tailor that message to the audience, so that way you're ensuring that they're engaged and they're truly along with you for the ride. Absolutely. So I think that separates the good from the great. So just kudos to you for that. And I definitely felt your passion and your love for portraying Martha Enfield. So thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, we're going to go ahead and speak to you a little bit later. At this time, what we wanted to do was give you all a sneak peek into what the Virginia African American Cultural Center will look like. This will give you an idea of what we're striving for, what this monumental project will look like, what it will entail, and the transformational impact that it will have, not only in Virginia Beach, but the Hampton Roads area, the entire Commonwealth, the nation, and the world, I believe. So enjoy the sneak peek, and then we'll continue with our conversation.
Coming soon to Hampton Roads, the Virginia African American Cultural Center will be a place that brings people together, celebrating African American history and culture, providing educational opportunities, fostering meaningful interaction, and bridging communities. Located in Virginia Beach, Virginia, at the intersection of Newtown Road and Diamond Springs Road, the Cultural Center is nested within some of the many culturally rich African American communities of Princess Anne County. This prominent site along a well-traveled corridor is a visible beacon of innovation and celebration for the African American community. The Cultural Center will tell the story of African Americans in Virginia. Co-Ed Q. The building's design is arranged according to this guiding formula. Co, meaning community, Ed, meaning education, and Q, meaning culture. The site design is planned for 2 phases. Phase 1, the Community Center, further named the Drum, and Phase 2, the Performance Center. The site will provide community gathering space, outdoor recreation space, and ample visitor parking. Here, in the recreation area, restored basketball courts with new architectural landscaping features adjoined, bridging connection to the Drum. Resting atop the Drum is the Sacred Circle, intended to serve as a green roof, allowing for outdoor learning and instruction. Taking a closer look at the project phasing, let's look at Phase 1. Beating as the pulse of the project, the Drum will occupy Phase 1. The Drum functions as the co-ed part of the formula. The Drum's elliptical form offers a multifaceted facade to all sides. The sweeping serpentine site walls serve as outreaching arms that both embrace the Drum and welcome its neighbors. The sweeping site walls also help create a gently rising hill, allowing for multifunctioning use and moments of discovery. Topped with a green roof, the Drum lives as an expression of nature, sustainability, and learning. Soon after Phase 1 is completed and opened, construction of Phase 2 will begin. Phase 2 fulfills the Q part of the formula and will function as the center's primary performance venue. Bringing the site to completion, this final wing of the center will provide larger scale opportunities for formal performances and entertainment showcases, seating up to 250 guests. Sealed within the drum is the Great Room, a space manifest for the great coming together of people and community. Wrapped warmly by the exterior walls of meeting screen system, this flexible space will facilitate programs and gatherings for performance, expositions, conventions, ceremonies, lectures, and more. With the guiding principles of cultivating community, education, and culture, the expanse of the Great Room is shaped to encourage and reinforce these principles. Through a blend of sculptural architecture and artful historic artifacts, the facility will be bountiful in cultural expression and community interaction. Traversing the drum from the upper level of the Great Room, one can enjoy a performance or an event below, view into the art exhibitions beyond, or simply occupy the meeting rooms and administrative spaces available on that level. Another key feature in the building's program is a secondary flexible multi-purpose space to be separate from the Great Room. Here, the flexible space can facilitate a variety of programs, from conference meetings and training programs, to workshops and lectures, to hosting emerging technologies for digital learning for children and adults alike, and much more. The room can even provide direct access to the green roof for expanding the classroom beyond borders. The Virginia African American Cultural Center, a place of bringing people together.
Awesome, awesome. So as you can see, this project is going to be absolutely phenomenal and truly, truly transformative for, like I said, Virginia Beach, Hampton Roads, the Commonwealth, and the entire country. So I encourage you to continue to follow us, support us. What's coming up for the Virginia African American Cultural Center, focusing on 3 things this year, making sure we're continuing to lay a strong foundation as we continue on our journey to opening. With that being said, we are going to be hiring. So make sure you stay tuned to our website, our socials, for more information on some positions that will be coming up with the Cultural Center. So stay tuned for that. Additionally, we're looking to launch our capital campaign later this year. So make sure you stay tuned for more information on that and hopefully support us in that effort as well. And lastly, more programming and more of a presence on our site that's located at 744 Hampshire Lane in Virginia Beach at the intersection of Diamond Springs and Newtown Road. I think it's very important for us to ramp up the activity on the site so that way people can see that there is forward momentum, there's forward movement, but more importantly, making sure that we're engaging the community and establishing and building those relationships well in advance of us opening the doors. I think that is so important. So continue to support us, follow us. You'll hear about more opportunities to support us later on in our programming this evening. But at this time, we are so fortunate and so blessed to be able to speak with Mrs. Martha Ann Fields today. So I'm going to introduce her, and let's give her a warm virtual round of applause as she makes her way to the virtual stage.
Thank you.
Yes. Awesome. So Martha Ann Berkeley, born into slavery on December 18th, 1813. She married George Washington Fields when she was about 19 or 20, and they had 11 children together. Mrs. Fields escaped slavery in 1863, and it is through her courage and resilience that she led her family to freedom at Fortress Monroe in Hampton, Virginia. Mrs. Fields, it is such an honor and a pleasure to be able to speak with you today. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. So we'd like to learn a little bit more about you. Can you briefly share your story with us?
Born into slavery, chattel slavery. People tend to always just want to label it slavery, but there was different forms of slavery, and mine was chattel slavery. It was the hardest. I don't remember much about my mother or my father. Some tell me that my father was a white man, so I can only imagine what that meant. My mother either passed away or was sold away, but I have no memory of her. I worked on the plantation, my childhood days on the plantation, and when I became a teenager and 18 or 19 years old, I was brought into the big house to be the cook. And so I was the cook in the big house for the plantation owner, Miss Mary. She had about 75 of us that were enslaved. But being in the big house, being the cook, it awarded me a chance to meet who would become my husband, Washington Fields. And I remember the first day that I saw Washington. He was visiting the plantation with those that he lived on the plantation with. And I remember seeing him sitting up in the carriage. And I looked up at the carriage and I looked at Washington and I just thought to myself, well, the good Lord sure took his time in making him. And so we kept company, and it wasn't long before he asked me to be his wife. I said yes. And, those of us that were in bondage, marriages were not legal. Mm-hmm. We had our own ceremony called jumping the broom. And that's what we did. And once we were married, he stayed on the plantation where he lived, and I stayed on the plantation where I lived. And we had to get passes to visit each other. Mm-hmm. So we had what we called a broad marriage. It was difficult, the beginning of our marriage, to get passes, because that was about the same time that Nat Turner had begun his revolution. It set white folks off. So they weren't too easy to give us passes to be off the plantation for any amount of time. But after that passed over, he was able to come and visit me, and we had 11 children. So I can say he visited me often.
Wow. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story. As I mentioned, we are truly, truly honored and blessed to be able to speak with you this evening.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Your story is one of resilience and great, great courage. Where did you find your strength to self-liberate not only yourself, but your children and truly your entire family?
I found the strength in seeing my children sold away from me. I had 3 children that were sold before the Civil War. My daughter was only about 12, 13 years old. She was sold away from me and sold all the way to Georgia. And then after that, I had 2 little boys. They were about 7 and 8 years old. They were sold away from me. During the time of the Civil War, there were talk that those that were in the northern part of the South, like in Richmond and Hanover and places like that, that they were selling those that they were enslaving further south. And I feared that the woman who enslaved us at that time, Miss Catherine was her name, that she was going to sell my children further south. And so I had to take matters into my own hands, and I had to get them to freedom. And the thing that scared me was that I was leaving 2 boys. They were somewhere in Richmond. I didn't know where they were. And I was also leaving Washington because he was on another plantation. But I had to get the strength and the courage to get my children to freedom. It also stems from a conversation that I had with God. I remember after my 3 children had been sold away, I used to pray and I would talk to God. And one day God talked back, and he assured me that I would see freedom and be reunited with all of my children on this side of heaven. And so I took that promise from God, the strength of knowing that my children could be sold away from me again, and walked off the plantation.
Such courage, such just resilience, as I mentioned. What made you choose to guide your family to Fort Monroe in particular?
When we walked off the plantation, we were following the Union soldiers. They had been planted or stationed on the plantation where we were. It was called Nutshell. And we could see the soldiers around the plantation. And I knew that when they left, we were going to follow them. And so when the soldiers left, me and my children, we followed them. And we stayed in their encampment. They had a camp on the other side of the Pamunkey River. We stayed with them for a few days, and then we took boats with the Union Army down to Fort Monroe. So it wasn't in my head to do that. I was just going with the soldiers, and they were taking people down to, we called it Freedom Fortress. We didn't call it Fort Monroe. We called it Freedom's Fortress because we knew when we got there they couldn't send us back.
That's right. Freedom Fortress. That's
Yes.
right.
Yes.
So, what were you feeling when you were finally reunited with your children and husband? Did you ever think that you'd see them again?
I really did not. I had written it off that I probably wouldn't see them, even though I had that promise from God. I was trying to figure out how it was going to happen. And I remember I worked at Freedom's Fortress. I used to wash the uniforms of the soldiers of the Union Army. And I remember meeting a general, and I will never forget him. His name was General Wilder. He had heard about my story, and he told me one day, he said, Miss Fields, when the war starts to come to a close, I'm going to help you find your children. I promise. And I took it as, another promise to me. But as the war did start to come to a close, I walked from my house. We had built a little quarters, and I was walking down, and I was taking the uniforms back to the soldiers. And I encountered a young woman on the road, and it was my daughter, the one that had been sold away. The general sent telegrams to Georgia, found the plantation she had been sold to, made sure she came home. He found my 2 little boys that had been sold away in Richmond somewhere and made sure they came home. Oh. The reunion of me and my daughter, Louisa, I think I held her for a good hour because I was so afraid that if I let her go, she was going to be gone again. Now, my husband, Washington, he found us on his own. He found out that we had escaped or self-liberated, and he found us down at Fort Monroe. Sadly, he didn't get to spend a lot of time with his children in freedom. He took a job at a foundry not too far from Fort Monroe, and he got caught in a rainstorm. He got pneumonia and passed away after only 2 months after we had reunited. So it was an amazing feeling. My story is not unique. There were a lot of families that were reunited. But yes, it was a feeling of joy, of sheer joy.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine the joy that you felt being reunited with your family.
Yes.
So thank you for sharing that. The last question for you is speaking about legacy. Your family is established as one of the wealthiest families in Hampton Roads. How does that make you feel? And are you proud of this legacy that you created?
I am so proud of my children. And I often tell people that if they could endure what they endured, but be such successful people, anyone can do it. Because in your time, y'all have every opportunity right at your fingertips, opportunities that we never thought we would have. And so my legacy is not so much that that they went to school or that they became successful, but my legacy is that I was a good mother. And I was a good mother, and I took care of my children, which is one of the things that Washington and I said when we said our vows to each other before we jumped the broom. We said we would make sure that we took care of our children the best way that we could.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Mrs. Fields, thank you so much for joining us this evening. We appreciate you taking the time to speak to us and give us some insight into your journey and your story. So thank you so much. We hope you have a wonderful evening and hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Oh, wow. Okay. So that was such a wonderful and inspiring story. I hope that it inspired you all like it inspired me. And at this time, what we'd like to do is we've shared with you, the vision of the project that we're doing here in Virginia Beach, the Virginia African American Cultural Center. And at this time, we want to share with you some ways that you can support us. Membership is one of those ways. And at this time, I'd like to bring to our virtual stage our founder and chairman, Dr. Amelia Ross Hammond, to talk about those membership opportunities. She is our visionary, and we are so thankful for her. Amazing picture.
Well, good afternoon or good evening to everyone. This is an exciting opportunity, and I really enjoyed listening to Martha Fields because it tells you nothing is impossible. The journey she took, the manner in which she was persistent in bringing her children, is the same way I, as founder and chairman for the Virginia African American Culture Center, will be persistent until one day we will see this, just like she was able to see her children before she passed. I know. And it's a belief. And if you have that belief and you pray, things can happen. One of the things we look at is, I'll tell you a tiny bit. Since we had the founding in the late fall of 2015, the Virginia African Culture Center has partnered with educational and cultural institutes to produce compelling, interactive programs, artwork, and performances that enliven the rich story of African Americans, past and present. And while building the partnership and expanding its programming, the VAACC has never lost sight of its great vision, a transformative project that will help Americans of all races and ethnicity to better understand and appreciate and build on the stories of Black struggles and accomplishments throughout their life. Because you never know, you may be related in some way to some of these enslaved people. As you heard Martha say, she didn't really know her father, but she knows he may have been a complete different ethnicity. So if we want to keep these stories alive, if we want to keep it growing and reach all across the Commonwealth, we have an opportunity for you to help put together that legacy. We have a membership, which is annual. And if you notice, it's only $25. If you want to have the entire family, it's $100. And if you are so bold, because I believe in being bold, you can be like the young lady who was 92 years old and became our honorary member. She says, I know it's $25, but I want to see this going on. So in my 92nd year, when I had my daughter volunteer and participate because we believe in the vision, how can I get a lifetime membership? So she went in her little purse and she got out $1,000 and says, so we made her our honorary member because she has the faith. And I know you can do the same. We can't wait for anybody else to do this. It takes us. We must be that village. And the last thing I want to share is that we have a beautiful land, as you saw in the video, and we're surrounded by 7 historically African American communities. Not only that, we are in Virginia Beach, the oldest ongoing African American community, which is CTAC. And some of you know Pharrell is a product from CTAC. So you've seen how far he's gone, and he's going to be here very soon. So we need you all to look deeply. Join us. Visit our website at www.vaaccvb. And you can become a member. And someone asked, what are the benefits? We not only show what you're seeing right now in the virtual. Lovely, we've had Jean Clout. We're going to have Jodine. We've had Justin Harrington. These are people that are showing us what they've done in their career, young and old. And with everything, it takes funding. It takes putting our program together. It takes operating budget that has brought us the wonderful Tamar Smithers, who is just as talented. So tonight, before leaving us, take a minute. Visit our website. Look at the stories and the history we continue to put on. And one day we'll be doing even more on our website. Thank you for giving me the time to talk to you. As you can see, this is my passion. And I know it can become a reality. Just like Martha Fields got all her children back. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ross Hammond. So appreciate you, your vision. And I have to give a shout out to the board of the Virginia African American Cultural Center. They have been a strong working board since it was founded. So definitely want to thank them for their time, treasure, and talents as well. At this time, we will go ahead and jump back into our conversation with Valerie Davis. I'm excited to bring her back to the virtual stage, and we'll go ahead and continue our conversation.
Hello.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
Awesome. So I truly enjoyed our conversation earlier in our program today, and I'm so excited to dive back in and just explore a little bit more about you. So you shared with us all of the many hats that you wear, right? You're an award-winning storyteller, playwright, producer, and now author. And we'll hear a little bit more about that later.
Okay.
How do you balance it all? And is there a specific art form that you enjoy best?
I'm learning to balance it. I will tell you that this month, right now, I'm doing a really bad job of balancing all of that because I'm doing 3 residencies, and one is in Hanover, one is in Richmond, and one is in Virginia Beach. And so I'm doing a really bad job. I really overextended myself a little bit for this month, so I'm learning. It's a process, and I am learning it. My favorite part of storytelling is when I get to give a voice to women from the past because they didn't have a voice. The things that I can say in the stories about them that I can tell now, they could have never done. The words would have been beaten out of them, or they would have risked dying. And so it gives me such great joy to be able to tell their stories, and not just tell their stories, but tell them in wholeness. Yes. And complete, and without whitewashing it, but to be able to tell every facet of their life to audiences now. So that is my favorite part, to be able to give my ancestors a voice.
Yes, unapologetically.
Oh yes,
authentically.
If you ever see me apologizing, it ain't me.
I love it. I need to take some more of that energy. And speaking of balance, I think balance is balancing balance, right? Like you said, you have seasons in your career, in your life, where you're could be a little bit overwhelmed. You have some low productivity seasons, but you're balancing that. And I think that the fact that you are self-aware, I think helps you and helps us, especially as Black women, to be able to balance all of the demands that we have in our lives as mothers, wives, sisters, aunts, powerful business women, actresses, playwrights, all of those things. So yes, thank you so much for sharing that.
Yes, and we have to know when to say no.
Exactly.
I can't.
Exactly.
I can't.
Yes. And not being sorry about that either.
Right. Yes. Sorry, not sorry.
And no is a complete sentence, right?
Yes. You could end with a period or exclamation point.
Hello. So since it's Women's History Month, and just shout out again to all the amazing women this month, let's explore the many hats that an enslaved woman wore. And how do you feel that it affects the Black superwoman mentality that we have today, right? The strong Black woman having to have it all together and be in 10,000 places at once.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So if you look at the enslaved woman, and not taking anything from the men, because they went through a lot of trauma as well. But the women on the plantation, they were midwives. They were wet nurses. They worked in the big house as cooks, as maids, as seamstress. And they had to juggle all of that sometimes while carrying their babies on their backs. And I look at this, and when I looked this information up, I was like floored. So in 1808, they stopped trafficking Africans into the United States. And that birthed breeding farms. So because they weren't having any new enslaved people coming in, they had to figure out a way to reproduce what they had. And so we had breeding farms. Virginia had one of the largest breeding farms in the South. And so from 1810 until 1860, the United States went from about 1.4 million Africans in this country to about 4 million. And the Black women were the ones that produced that. So they basically doubled the size of enslaved people in this country through Black women. So we were responsible for a lot of that. We were responsible for repopulating the forced labor people. We were responsible for our bodies being used to advance medical science. So we wore all of those hats, and we had so many things pulling at us. And even today, the Black woman we wear so many hats. I observe things, and I observe people. And I was in a grocery store a few months ago, and it was women. It was about 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and there were women in the store. And just about every woman in the store was on their phone. And they were making doctor's appointments. They were talking to their kids. They were doing this and they were doing that while grocery shopping. If you look at most businesses, and I call them corporate plantations, but if you look at most businesses and you have women working there, when the kids get hurt at school or whatever, they're calling mama. They're not calling daddy.
Right.
When you're at work, you're still working from home. So you still have that hat on as mother and employee at the same time. And especially young Black women, when they have entry-level positions. I know in a lot of call centers, it's 90% young Black single mothers, unfortunately, but that's what's there. And so many of those call centers now, the first thing they tell you is that you can't have your phone.
I used to work in a call center. I know how that is. Yeah.
You can't have your phone. And so they're like, wait a minute, I got kids.
Exactly.
And so, and if you were caught with your phone, you would be punished. It's the same thing on the plantation. You was caught with a book, you'd be punished. So we have come a long way, but unfortunately, a lot of things that we dealt with on the plantation during that period, we still deal with on corporate plantations. The playbook has not changed at all. The rules have not changed. The verbiage has, but the rules are still the same.
Yeah, I agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
I agree with you on that. I want to take a moment just to pause and thank everyone for joining us again. We're going to continue with our conversation, but we will have a Q&A portion of our program. So if you have some questions for Ms. Valerie, make sure you leave them in the comments. We'll go ahead and get those to her during the Q&A segment. If you're not following us on social media yet, make sure you do follow us, like, subscribe, do all of those things. Thank you so much. All right, let's go ahead and finish with the conversation. So when we think of history, we think of legacy, right? What's your legacy that you're leaving? Making an impact for generations to come. What do you want your legacy to be?
I want my legacy to be that I honored my ancestors and I made sure that I taught the next generation about how they can be just as great as their ancestors. We talked about, I did a presentation for a group of students, and we got on the subject of why they want to take Black history out of schools and why they're not allowing it to be taught in schools. And I told the students, I said, it's not because they don't want you to know about what they did that was bad to your ancestors. They don't care. Matter of fact, they pride themselves in you knowing how bad they were, how bad enslavers were. I said, they don't want you to know how your ancestors became success.
Ooh.
So all the Black Wall Streets, and we always focus on the one in Tulsa, but every state had a Black Wall Street.
Right.
They don't want you to know how it was built. And so I tell the students, don't focus on the destruction, focus on how to build it. You know, I said,
Yeah.
the people always say, oh, if you don't know your history, then you're doomed to repeat it. And I don't like that word doomed, because some of our history bears repeating. We need to repeat how to rebuild our communities.
Yes.
We need that blueprint back.
Yes.
So that's some of our history that needs to be repeated.
Yes. Oh, I so thank you for sharing that perspective. I don't think I've ever looked at it that way, but you're so right. Being able to share with our young people who are, you know, going to continue on doing amazing things in this world, how we were successful, how we did overcome those challenges, and giving them the tools and the techniques that they can form into their own way, but to be able to create their own change in the world.
Yeah.
So thank you for sharing that.
Absolutely.
Last couple of questions here. We're talking about students, right? You were speaking to your students, and right now we may have some aspiring, you know, students, even older, you know, artists, playwrights, storytellers that are in our virtual audience. What advice would you give them as they continue to pursue their dreams?
I would give them the advice to not wait for someone to ask you to do something, but to go ahead and do it yourself. You can put on performances. They're always like libraries looking for people to come and do presentations or performances. So go ahead and do that. When you start to do it, of course, there's not going to be a lot of finances that's going to be exchanging hands, but that will come. Keep building and keep reading, keep researching, keep making sure that you're really diving into whoever it is that you're going to be portraying, even if it's not a famous historical figure, if it's somebody that's still living today. Make sure that you get that information about their story and their lives so that you can present it in a whole way.
I like that. I like that. So with that being said, what's next for you? What are your plans for the future? We mentioned a book. So if you want to share a little bit of information about that.
Yes. I have just authored my first book. It is, thank you. It is a memoir. There it is. It is called Spirit of the Hummingbird, Mom, Me, and PSP. And it is a story about me and my mom. I was her primary caregiver the last 5 months of her life. My brothers and sisters and I shared that responsibility when she fell ill back in 2012. She passed away in 2018. And so from October of 2018 into February, I was her primary caregiver. And the book is really about her and me and everybody else and how they played a part in her life, her parents, her in-laws, my dad, my sister. We lost my sister 6 months prior to mom passing away. You know, we lost my sister. And so all of that is in the book. And after I wrote it, and I'm writing it. And then when I finally finish it, I look back at it, I'm like, wait a minute, this is some, whole coming around, circle. Yeah. The book starts out with my earliest memory of me and my mom when it was just me and her. My older brothers and sisters were in school. My younger brother hadn't been born. So it was just me and mom. She'd fix me lunch. She'd teach me things. We'd watch her stories. And so when she got older and when she got ill and I was her primary caregiver, it was just me and mom. I'd fix her lunch. I'd remind her of things that she taught me. We'd watch her stories. So it was full circle. It was full circle. So I'm so proud of it because I've been telling other stories, other people's stories, other ancestor stories. And now I get to tell my bloodline story.
I love it. I love it. I shared with you during our rehearsal that I can't wait to read it. You know, caregiving is not an easy job. It is not for the faint of heart, I would say.
It's
right? I'm a caregiver for my mother. I'm doing it remotely now. She's still in New York, but I still handle finances and things like that. So being able to read your story, I think is going to be absolutely amazing. So I can't wait for that. And I don't know if you mentioned where people can get the book, if you haven't.
It is not on Amazon yet. I'm planning to get it on Amazon. You can email me at Yemimah's World, YEMIMASWORLD at yahoo.com. And they ask that you want to order a copy. I'll send you the Cash App link and you can Cash App me. But yeah, I'm planning to have some book signings coming up in some places. So they'll be able to purchase it that way. But for right now, you can email me and order your copy and I'll get it out to you. And if you do it that way, you get an autographed copy.
Awesome. Awesome. Spirit of the Hummingbird. So make sure you all go out and get your copy and then make sure you find out where Valerie's going to be so you can get it signed, right?
Exactly.
Awesome. So how I like to end our Artist Masterpiece series is with a statement. So I'm going to repeat a statement. I'm going to say a statement and then I want you to repeat after me and then finish it.
Okay.
I am a masterpiece because.
I am a masterpiece because I have finally accepted what my purpose is. And I walk in it boldly. I will not apologize for it. I understand that I am not for everybody. And those that get it, get it. And those that don't, that's fine. So that's why I am a masterpiece.
Love it, love it, love it. Oh, I love it. Not everybody has the opportunity to truly understand what their purpose is. So, Valerie, thank you so much for joining us this evening.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing. I am so humbled and grateful that you had me on tonight. It has been an amazing time.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to transition into our Q&A portion of the program. So all of our audience members, if you're watching, if you have questions for Valerie, drop them in the comments. We'll go ahead and get them loaded and make sure we ask Valerie. We don't have any yet, but I'm going to start off with a question for you, Valerie. As an artist, and you mentioned a little bit how you approach your work. What is your method for approaching the work that you do, especially from a historical perspective?
A lot of times the work approaches me. So sometimes I don't plan to do specific people, and that work will approach me. For example, my middle name is Yemimah, and it is a name that I chose. That is not the name that was given to me at birth. It is a name that I chose. And this is how I chose it. The first Aunt Jemima was Nancy Green. She was a storyteller. She was our first really big time storyteller. She was hired by a company to be the brand and the face of a pancake company. And she would travel to different places and she would tell stories. And I just love the fact that she did that. And with the money that she earned, she would give it back to her community. And I thought, this is our first griot, our first storyteller here in the Americas. And nobody knows her story. And so I took her namesake. Instead of Jemima, I just chose Yemimah. So I took her namesake. And then I started telling her story. That was the first story that I ever told. And that's how I approach it. A lot of times the work finds me, or, they contact me. The ancestors, the spirit will contact me. Oh, you want your story? It got so bad. I felt like Whoopi Goldberg on Ghost. And I was like, wait a minute. Hold up.
What am I hearing? Okay.
I can't tell everybody's story. Hold on.
I love it. One of my favorite movies, by the way.
Wait.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
So, I'll ask another question. And as people are watching, remember, if you have a question, just drop it in the comments. But a question for me is, as a actress, vocalist, I have so many moments that stand out for me on stage, in my performances, right? Is there a particular performance that you recall that really stood out for you and really just impacted you in a way that maybe changed the way you do things?
There are two, actually. I was performing the Martha Ann Field story at the tavern for the fourth graders. And there was a woman sitting in the back. And I thought she was with the school. I thought maybe she was one of the chaperones. So after I finished the presentation, she came up to me. And she had tears in her eyes. And she was holding my hand. And she said, "Oh, my God, you just told my great-great-great-grandmother's story." And I was like, "Oh, okay. So your great-great-great-grandmother was enslaved and she escaped? That's nice." She said, "No. Martha Ann Fields is my great-great-great-grandmother."
Oh my goodness.
And I was like, "What now?" It was so amazing to be able to meet her descendants.
Mm.
It was an amazing. And she said, "Thank you. Thank you for continuing to tell her story and keeping it in the forefront."
Mm.
I was presenting another story that I do. I do the story about Gabriel in the 1800 revolt in Richmond, Virginia, and I tell it through the eyes of his wife, Nan. And I was telling it some years back, and I had one of the plantation sites, one of the historical sites, contact me. And they said, "We have a man here, and he says he's the descendant of Gabriel, and he wants to meet you." I was like, "Okay." So
Wow.
I got to meet the descendants of Martha Ann Fields, and I got to meet the descendants of Gabriel.
Mm.
So to do that is, I don't know if anybody else has ever done that before.
Yeah, I mean, I can only imagine that must be inspiring. For me, it would be a little scary.
Yes.
You know, because that's huge. You have her descendants there,
Her blood.
her
Yeah.
blood, right? That is looking, and you hope that you're able to portray her in a way that makes them proud and does her story justice.
Yes.
So that it's a lot of, it can be a lot of pressure for that. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. We don't have any questions, but I have one more question, and then we'll go ahead and end our program this evening. I want to give a shout out to one of our partners in the area, Arts for Learning Virginia. Shout out to Arts for Learning Virginia. So I know that you are doing a show with them on, is it Coretta Scott King? Is that correct? Or you have done?
I have done Coretta Scott.
Okay.
I do the Martha Ann Fields story with them. Okay. I do Coretta and Harriet Tubman.
Okay. So, what's the next event coming up with them?
With Arts for Learning, the next event is going to be April 1st, and is with MOCA.
Oh, Virginia
and
MOCA.
Virginia Beach. Yes, Virginia MOCA. Yes. So I'll be presenting there on April 1st.
Awesome. For their community day.
For their community day. Yes. I'll be doing Harriet Tubman.
Awesome. That's another partner of ours. So looking forward to that. We do have one question. I will go ahead and ask that. What is your process for preparing into transforming and portraying these powerful women?
My process is meditation. And I will revisit books that I have about them, because as many times as I have read the books, there's always going to be something new that I didn't see the first time that I can add to the story. In my meditation, I talk to whoever I'm portraying, Martha Ann Fields. What do you want the audience to know? What message do you have for this particular audience? Because every time I do the program, it's slightly different, again, depending on who my audience is. So meditation. And then when I finish, I have to kind of debrief, because I open myself up when I allow them to use me. You know, we always hear the old preachers used to always get in the pulpit, and before they preach, they always said, "Move me out of the way, Lord. Have your way." And I do the same thing. Move Valerie out of the way. Martha Ann Fields, Coretta Scott King, Harriet Tubman, have your way. So that's how I prepare.
I love it. Well, Valerie, thank you so much once again for joining us this evening. This has been absolutely amazing. I cannot wait to connect with you in person.
Yes,
there's a lot of synergy there, and I just know we'll be good friends. So
absolutely.
We already are. So thank you so much once again for joining us this evening. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful evening. We have tons of comments. Bravo, you were outstanding. So
thank you.
Thank you so much once again.
Again, thank you so much for having me. Thank you so much, Dr. Ross Hammond. I appreciate you both, and I appreciate the work that you are doing, and I can't wait to work with you in the future.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right. Well, you take care. You have a good night.
Thank you too.
You're
Bye-bye.
welcome. All right. Wasn't that an amazing, amazing program this evening? Thank you all for joining us once again for our Virtual Artist Masterpiece series featuring Valerie Davis. This was a phenomenal show, phenomenal program, and I thank you all for continuing to join us and support us. Thank you to our board of directors. As I mentioned earlier in the program, they are our hardworking board, and it is because of their diligence and their dedication that we're able to continue on our journey to opening. If you're not following us on any of our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, we're also on LinkedIn. Make sure you do that. The VAACC. Make sure you follow us and support us there. Dr. Amelia Ross Hammond mentioned our membership program. So if you're not a member, please consider becoming a member. Our individual memberships are only $25 for the year, $100 for a family of 4. And we do have corporate sponsorships available as well. All of that information is on our website. We could not do the work that we do without input from our audience, from our supporters and our participants. So we do have a survey. I think that we're going to go ahead and drop the link in the QR code very shortly. Please take that short survey. It's about 5 questions. It helps us to see what worked, what didn't work, what we need to improve on, and just how you're liking the programming so far. So please make sure that you fill out that survey for us. And lastly, make sure that you stay tuned for our April Artist Masterpiece series that will be on April 20th, Thursday, April 20th at 6 p.m. in the evening. 7 p.m. in the evening. Thursday, April 20th, 7 p.m. Make sure you stay tuned. More information on our website will be coming shortly. Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful evening. See you until next time.